Episode 25, the Podfade-Away Show. 25 and still live. You are listening to Mike Murphy Unplugged. Learn, create, move forward. I am your host, Mike Murphy. I'm a one-man band and technology junkie. I love helping people figure things out, and I am really excited to be here with you today. The goal of Mike Murphy Unplugged is to help you learn what you need to know in order to create online content so you can move forward in business and in life. And in today's episode 25, what does the term pod fade mean? What are some causes of pod fading? And what are some steps that you can take to prevent pod fading? Let's start the show with a question of the week from Ask Mike Anything. And for those of you just tuning into the show for the first time, Ask Mike Anything. It's your chance to ask me what you want to know more about. Where are you struggling in your online business? Just head on over to mikemurphy.co. Leave me a question and I will answer it in a future episode. Today's Ask Mike Anything is about gear. What is the best microphone to start with if my budget is tight? I'm going to say that this question gets asked of me more than any other question on Blab, and pretty much everyone gets this question a lot. So the answer is easy, and that is the Audio-Technica ATR 2100. This microphone gets recommended more than any other piece of equipment on the planet, I'm pretty sure. The ATR 2100 is a dynamic microphone. Dynamic microphones are used mostly in broadcasting because it rejects a lot of the room noise. And the ATR 2100 is also great because you can connect with either an XLR cable or you can use a USB computer right into your computer, and that is pretty awesome to have both. Also, it sounds pretty good, and it's only $50. That's right, $50 for a good quality microphone. I own one, and I can say that I was surprised by the quality for such an inexpensive mic, but the ATR 2100 is my suggestion for any new podcaster or content creator on a budget. And I will leave a link in the show notes as always. So let's jump into episode number 25 with some statistics first. And I've probably screwed up these statistics a little bit as they're from memory. They come from Todd Cochran of blueberry.com, which is what I use for my podcast feed on WordPress. Okay, ready for this? Kind of depressing. But 50% of all new podcasters quit before episode number 7. Of those who make it to episode 7, 50% only make it to episode number 15. And out of those that make it, the podcasters that make it to episode 25 have a really high chance of lasting for 2 years or more. So I am pretty proud of myself to make it to episode 25. While that doesn't really sound like a big number, according to the stats, I'm kind of a big deal. So what about those that don't make it to episode 7 or 15? Enter the term podfade. What is podfade, you ask? Well, according to Urban Dictionary, which we all know is very accurate, podfade is when podcasts begin putting out episodes more and more sporadically and at greater intervals. Typically begins with one episode missed, but if they're not careful, it can compound, sometimes severe as one podcast every other month, and podfade often leads to podcast death. In my words, it's simply when podcasters either start to lose interest or they get too busy and they just stop producing shows on time until eventually they stop altogether. Why does podfade happen? What are some common causes? I have 10 here that I'm going to go through real quick, and then I'm going to spend some time telling you how to prevent pod fade from happening. So here's the list of 10. Lack of time. Probably the number one cause in my opinion. People just underestimate how much time they need to invest in producing a podcast. Then life takes over, and before long the podcast starts missing schedule and it ultimately stops. 2. Technical. Recording and post-production is really difficult for many, and the non-tech folks just don't want to do it anymore. Skills. Some people hate their voice. They're not comfortable on the mic, and they're not willing to put in the time to learn it. 4. Topics. Running out of things to say. It happens to a lot of folks. Number 5. Costs. Spending money on a hobby is not always practical for some. 6. No income coming in. I think many people falsely enter podcasting and think that they're going to get sponsors right away. They're going to make tons of money like the big ones do. Or they're going to do affiliate offers and everything's going to be great. And when it doesn't happen, pod fade. Number 7, crickets. Podcasting can be lonely when you start and you have very little audience. It's not easy pressing record and putting on a show and feeling like nobody is listening. Getting little or no feedback can be difficult, and many people just think, why bother? Nobody cares what I have to say. Number 8, boredom. Some people just don't enjoy it and they want to do something else. If you're not having fun, you're going to talk yourself out of it eventually. Number 9, guests. Some interview shows have trouble finding quality guests, or the entire process of interviewing is just a pain in the butt, and so they quit. Then finally, co-hosts. Some start off with their friend, and when their friend quits, well, they just stop doing it. How can you prevent pod fade from happening? 5 quick ways that I'm going to go into more detail, but the 5 before we start is be realistic, simplify, network, learn, and do a self-assessment. So the first one, be realistic. This is more of a pre-launch preventative step. In most cases, the main reason I think many new podcasters fail is the lack of planning or unrealistic expectations. I know, it's exciting to start something new like podcasting, but be prepared for how much time is required to produce and maintain a podcast. Be sure you have the time before you launch. Do you have a job? Family? Do you have quiet time to record? Have you asked experienced podcasters, how long does it take from start to finish to produce a show? I can't tell you how many aspiring podcasters I talk to that have tons of passion, but they have unrealistic goals, and most of them pod fade. I know, because I go to iTunes and I check on them, and it saddens me each time to see it happen. So in short, be realistic, be practical, plan for the time required. Don't bite off more than you can chew. The second way to prevent is simplify. If you set realistic goals and expectations, step 1, and you're finding you underestimated, or maybe it's harder than you thought, rather than giving up or skipping episodes, figure out what is taking the most time and work on that part of simplifying it. Look at your entire process from start to finish. Determine, can I cut out any steps? How do I make it just a little bit easier? And here are some areas that you might want to focus in on. Script writing and research. Spread the research out over the week. Make the show writing day as easy as possible. That's what I do. Other helpful tips. Keep fine-tuning your outline and script template so it's predictable for you and you don't have to reinvent the wheel each week. Show notes. Podcasters hate show notes. They are a pain. My suggestion is to write your script or outline with show notes in mind, so you really only need to copy and paste and then clean up the formatting in WordPress. Yes, show notes are important for SEO and Google rankings, which is why so many experienced podcasters place tons of emphasis on writing good show notes. And while I love a website that is really detailed show notes, FYI, see SeanWest.com if you want good example of awesome show notes, just do what you can. Don't let the show notes get you so frustrated to the point where you give up on your whole podcast. For me, I find a balance. I think my show notes are fair. They're okay. I could do it a lot better, but I keep things simple here and I choose my battles. Editing. A big reason Podfade is they spend hours editing and trying to get their podcast sounding perfect. I urge you to really try to curb this part. And the way I do it is by being prepared for each episode. So when I hit record, I get through the entire show rather quickly. My script is written in a way that I want to say it, and I read it over. So the first take is usually pretty close to me getting it done. I then go through and clean up any of the major gaps. I get the levels up to broadcast standard, and I'm done. With everything else, get the recording phase right, and the editing is going to be minimal. I spend my life using software and computers, and guess what? The more experience and better I get, the less I do. That's your goal. Just like we say in the photography business, get it right in camera, and the editing becomes almost obsolete. Marketing. Simplify your social media and marketing process. Get it on autopilot. Don't waste all your time in social media. Always use templates. Templates take time to set up, but they're going to make everything so much easier. For me, I use the same artwork template for each episode and social media channels. All I have to do is change the text for each new episode. And then use something like Buffer. Post everything all at once to Facebook, Twitter, and G+. Don't waste all your time doing everything manually. Bottom line, simplifying means making your entire process efficient and easily repeatable. Never stop fine-tuning this. Make each step as easy as possible. Before you know it, you can do it all in your sleep with little effort. This is really a big step in preventing pod fade, in my opinion. Think of your start to finish podcast as a one big template and fix the parts that get you hung up. The third way to prevent pod fading, network. One major cause of pod fade is the lack of audience and engagement. It's not easy working really hard show after show and feeling like nobody is listening. Somebody early on told me, you never know though who is listening, and it is true. I do have a small audience right now, but my trick is to pretend like I'm talking to one person that I think is my target market, and I do each episode as if I know that what I'm teaching or discussing is going to help them or is going to provide them valuable information they can use in their business or in life. I don't try to speak to the masses, and I keep reminding myself that if one person finds value in my content, then word will spread. How does word spread? You keep providing value. Your listeners will tell others. So don't be discouraged at first. This takes time. You never know who's listening. Keep going. Rome was not built in a day. And another way to get engagement and keep things exciting so you'll not pod fade away is to network with other podcasters. I'm not the most social person on the planet. I get it. The whole reason I do my weekly Blab for me is to network, create a community of people in the podcasting and the content creator space. And I can tell you firsthand, it works. I have met many established podcasters doing this. Some I consider friends now. I never would have met them if I stayed tucked away in my bedroom studio, unwilling to put myself out there. This engagement with like-minded podcasters is huge for your morale and your confidence, and I think it's a big part in keeping you going. Also rely on Facebook and Instagram and Google+, your social media channels, to network. Social media is not just to promote you, it's to keep things fun and exciting. Okay, the fourth reason to prevent pod fading, learn. I preach this probably too much, but in our world of instant gratification, don't forget, everything is hard at first, and it is up to you to learn better ways of doing things. It will get easier and easier. Podcasting is like anything else. You are not going to be an expert from the start, and it may take you a while before you get things running smoothly, but don't give up so soon, especially if you really had a passion for podcasting or that podcasting is going to bring value to your business. Stick with it. Keep grinding it out. It's going to get better and easier. How do I learn? I never stop reading articles and tips on how to podcast or how to write and tell stories and how to interview. Even if it's not directly part of my podcast style, I learn as much as I can, and that makes it all better. Then I learn all about the audio and the production, and I try new things each episode that I think is going to make it easier on me. Looking back on episode 1, I've come leaps and bounds from where I am today. It's only been 5 months, and that progress is massive. Stick with it. Other ways to learn, ask experts or people you look up to in the space for help and advice. You're going to be surprised at how much people want to help others in the podcast community. And in doing so, you're not only going to get better, but you're going to develop your brand recognition and you're going to get confidence to keep going. Another way for me, I'm going to Podfest Tampa. It's to network, to get my name out there, but there's going to be experts I respect there, and I want them to give me feedback and advice. Sure, this is out of my comfort zone. I don't enjoy when people criticize or analyze me at all. But I'm in this for the long haul, and guess what? I have to do whatever it takes, and so do you. My final tip for preventing pod fade, and believe me, there are so many more. Just look in the mirror, do a gut check, revisit your roadmap and the reasons for starting the podcast. Sometimes when we get buried or overwhelmed, we lose the big picture. Remind yourself, what was your intention or your goal of starting the podcast in the first place? Was it for a hobby? Was it to make money? Was it to build your brand up? Episode 22, all about finding your why. Remind yourself of this. Get back on track by adjusting your attitude and your content. Little mindset shifts might be all you need. Make sure you're enjoying podcasting. Sure, it's not all going to be fun, but you must love what you're doing, or otherwise, why bother? Are you moving forward in the direction you want to go? For me, I want to build a teaching platform of courses that are going to generate passive income so I can travel around the world and podcast. Wow, did I just say that out loud? That sounds awesome. I want to achieve this goal, and podcasting is going to help me facilitate this goal. You see what just happened there? I did a self-evaluation, and doing this every so often, it reminds you of why you started, what your goals are. You need to achieve this new sense of clarity to help you realize that the hard work will pay off and that pod fading is not an option. Once you remind yourself of your long-term goal, it's up to you to keep fine-tuning the process so you can manage it easier. Get it back to a point where you enjoy what you're doing. I know this is a simplified and not an easy solution, but oftentimes just taking a step back, looking at the big picture is all you need to do to breathe some new life into something. So in conclusion, there are so many reasons pod fading exists, and everybody's reasons and solutions are different. But I think it all comes down to preparing and budgeting time, simplifying the process of making podcast episodes, and just understanding your goals. Goals are the things that we really want, and that often comes with working hard. So just keep that in check. If it were easy, everyone would be doing it. Pod fade happens usually from giving up too soon, in my opinion. And guess what? If you do pod fade, you can always start back up. Maybe taking a break is all you need. Consider doing seasons, which is becoming very popular in podcasts. And I think the main reason people do seasons is to give yourself a break and to refuel the tanks. If it feels like you're talking to crickets, or maybe you're not making money, or you just don't think you're making an impact, don't quit. Maybe just change your format from, say, a monocast show to interviews. Keep your focus on producing good content. It's going to pay off. I'm not even there yet, but I know it's coming, and it will for you too. So be patient, do the work, and always make sure you love what you're doing. As always, I thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to this podcast. I do appreciate it. If you need help with launching your podcast or learning the tools of the trade for creating online content, head over to mikemurphy.co, sign up for my weekly newsletter, and also while you're there, you can leave me a question for a future Ask Mike Anything. I thank you for joining me today. I hope you join my one-man band, and together we can learn, create, and move forward. Cheers.